I can't imagine living across the world from my family for over 15 years and then having to hear through a friend that they all died without the chance to say goodbye. Nobody should have to live through that. But my great-grandfather Ben Grob experienced the grief of never being able to see his family for his whole life in the United States. Ben was born in 1904 in what was then Stanislav, Galicia. Stanislav was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, but when Austria-Hungary lost World War I in 1918, Stanislav became part of Poland. Post-World War II, Stanislav was part of the Ukraine, and since the fall of the Soviet Union, it has been and is currently called Ivano-Frankivsk, Ukraine. Ben had a mother, father, two older sisters, and three younger brothers. In elementary school, he learned the Bible, some Talmud, and a bit of Hebrew. However, since he only spoke Yiddish, Polish, and German at home, he never was fluent in Hebrew. Yiddish was the primary language at school, and it was spoken at home, while Polish and German were the native languages of the country. For secondary school, he went to a Jewish high school called a gymnasium. After school, he helped his parents in selling fur for their business. Assisting the family business was a common thing for a child to do back then. Ben was a positive kid, but faced a lot of negativity through observations of anti-Semitism in everyday life. Jews did not have many job opportunities, and housing was small and limited. His family was one of the few Jewish families to live in a city instead of a small town called shtetls. The thought of coming to America was becoming more and more prominent in Ben's mind. There were many economic opportunities in the United States, and immigrating to America seemed like the best thing to do. This is what Ben decided to do. In 1921, at the age of 17, Ben came to Brooklyn, New York by boat, alone. Ben had cousins in Brooklyn, and in order to receive a visa, one needed evidence that one's family would support them. It was good that he went then because in 1924, the United States severely limited immigration from Eastern Europe. Because he spoke Polish, Yiddish, and German growing up, Ben had to learn English when he came to Brooklyn. To do that, he went to night school. He worked again for his family, but this time with his cousins, at a home-based clothing business on the Lower East Side for 10 years. His job was to take samples of clothing to different stores and try to sell them. One day in 1930, he went to Bridgeport, New York to a store and met my great-grandmother Lillian. They got married 1 year later and opened up their own store called Grob's Department Store. Grob's Department Store was a dry goods store, which meant it sold children's clothes, sewing machines, rugs, and carpets. Really a bit of everything. It was quite successful. They raised their children in middle-class lifestyle. As successful as the store was, it didn't take over Ben's life. Lillian was the business lady. On Saturday nights, he would want to go to dances and events at the synagogue, and Lillian would reply, "We can make $1 more if we stay 1 more hour." So they would stay open 1 more hour, but Lillian always said Ben was the more kind-hearted one. Ben wasn't the only Jew who immigrated from Stanislav. There was a club called Landsmannschaften, Yiddish, of immigrants from Stanislav that would meet every Sunday. Ben participated in the club from 1941 to 1942 to receive news about his family back in Stanislav. His parents and siblings would write him letters written in Polish, Yiddish, and German, and he would receive them through this club. The letters said things like, "Things are very hard for the Jews. Please, Ben, can you please get the paperwork? Things are very bad and getting worse. But in our love for each other, we are strong." Ben tried to help his family, but he couldn't get them to America in time. He found out through the club in late 1941 that they all had been killed. They were lined up and shot all together. He never learned the exact date or where they died, and that impacted the rest of his life. Ben had achieved his economic goals and there was much less anti-Semitism in America, but because of the lack of knowledge about his family and the grief, Ben was living two lives, one in Connecticut and one in his home far away. Ben died without any closure, and my great-uncle Lenny decided that wasn't fair. So years after Ben passed away, Lenny fulfilled his father's wish, to go back to Stanislav and weep on the soil where his family was murdered. Lenny translated the letters into English and found out Ben's home address. He went to Stanislav and put flowers at their old apartment at the memorial of Jews who had died in the Holocaust as a funeral. He completed Ben's one final desire.